I paid off my parents' debt, covered their rent, bought groceries for years. Then they told me I'd never be as good as my brother, who stole from them and went to prison. So I walked out and took their stability, their house, and their illusions with me. They always said I was the quiet one, the background character, the helper. I never caused trouble, never asked for much. If anything, I spent my 20s trying to clean up messes I didn't make. Most of them were financial. Most of them weren't mine. My name is Alex. I'm 31. I live in the same town I grew up in, not by choice, but by necessity. After college, I stayed close to home when my dad was laid off. Bills started piling up fast. My parents had refinanced the house twice. My mom's credit cards were maxed. My younger sister moved in with her boyfriend to escape it all. But me? I stayed. I took 2 part-time jobs. Grocery store clerk in the morning, delivery driver in the evening. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. More importantly, it paid theirs. At first, I thought it was temporary. Just until Dad got back on his feet. Just until Mom found something to supplement her disability. Just until things stabilized. But the months turned to years. And in that time, I did what needed to be done. I paid the rent when they couldn't. I bought the groceries. I handled the car repairs. When the bank threatened to repossess the house, I dipped into my own savings, the same fund I'd been building for a 1-bedroom apartment downtown, and paid off the remainder of their second mortgage. I didn't ask for praise. I didn't expect gratitude. I just didn't want my family to lose the only home we'd ever had. But Ryan got a different story. He was the golden son. Always had been. He was older than me by 3 years, and had left home at 19 to pursue big dreams. What those dreams were, exactly, no one really knew. Every time he came home, he told a different version: real estate, digital marketing, crypto coaching. There were Instagram posts of beaches, watches, and cocktails. My parents never questioned it. They believed every filtered story he told. To them, Ryan was the successful one. When Ryan called them needing help with a business opportunity, they didn't hesitate. They liquidated a CD they'd been saving since before the recession. $15,000, gone overnight. A month later, they co-signed a loan for 20 more. Ryan said it was for scaling. I only found out about any of this when the collection notices started arriving and they asked me to help with the minimums. They never once told me they'd given that money to Ryan. Not directly. They just said they were going through a rough patch again. Still, I covered it. I always did. I took a 3rd shift at night. I stopped eating out entirely. I started skipping lunch. I stretched every dollar until it screamed. And when I finally asked if Ryan was contributing anything, if he could help even a little, my father scoffed. "He's building something big," he said. "You wouldn't understand. That's why he'll make it further than you ever will." That line didn't come out of nowhere. It was the undercurrent of every interaction in our house. Every family gathering, every holiday, every dinner where Ryan was mentioned like some kind of mythological figure. When I brought up my job, my dad called it honest, at least. When I mentioned wanting to go back to school, my mom said she wasn't sure I had the energy for it. When Ryan sent home pictures of his new condo, they framed it. They framed it. With money I helped repay. To them, I wasn't building anything. I was just around. Helpful, reliable, constant. Which also meant invisible. Until the electricity was due. Or the rent bounced. Or they forgot how much groceries actually cost. I can still remember the moment I realized how deep it ran. It was after I paid off the final $7,200 on their second mortgage. I used every last cent I had saved. I didn't even tell them. It was automatic. I just forwarded the bank confirmation to my mom's email. A week later, during dinner, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd say something. Instead, my father was laughing about Ryan's new pitch deck. "He's going to be a millionaire by 35, he told me, slicing into a steak I'd bought with the last of my tips. "You could learn something from your brother." That was the moment it clicked. They weren't just blind to what I did. They didn't care. To them, Ryan was the dream. I was the spare, even when I was the one keeping them afloat. And I didn't resent them yet. I just kept hoping, somewhere in my gut, that if I worked hard enough, did enough, proved enough, they'd finally see me as more than the background noise. But that hope? It didn't last much longer. Because eventually, I'd learn what Ryan had actually done with the money. And by then, it would be too late for them. Because I had already decided. I was going to leave. But this time, I wasn't leaving them behind. I was taking everything I gave with me. Ryan's return was always treated like a holiday. No matter how long it had been, 3 months, 9 months, even a year, whenever he visited, the house transformed. My mom cleaned obsessively. My dad ironed a shirt for the first time in months. They even pulled out the good dishes I didn't know he still owned. I came home from my shift the Friday evening he arrived and found his car already in the driveway, shiny, rented, and just a bit too flashy. Inside, they were laughing over drinks like nothing had ever gone wrong. Like we weren't 3 months behind on the water bill. Ryan greeted me with that smirk of his, the one that always hovered between charm and contempt. "Still rocking the night shift?" he asked, slapping my shoulder. I nodded. "Still running your digital pet-sitting crypto agency?" He laughed louder than the joke deserved and poured himself another drink. Mom didn't say anything, just gave me that look. The one that said, "Let it go. Don't ruin this." We sat down to dinner, steak, potatoes, even wine. I knew they couldn't afford any of it. I also knew who they expected to quietly pay the bill when the overdraft hit. It always circled back to me. That night, Ryan dominated the table, as usual. He talked about his latest venture with animated gestures and vague jargon. He never actually said what the business did, just that it had explosive ROI potential and vertical integration. My dad beamed like a proud investor. My mom asked if he needed anything else to get it off the ground. And me? I sat there chewing quietly, calculating how many grocery runs I'd need to skip to cover the cost of this dinner. Then came the toast. "To family," Ryan said, lifting his glass. "Even when one of us is still figuring it out." The implication hung heavy. Everyone laughed, except me. After dinner, I stayed behind to clean while they all moved to the living room. I didn't mind. Cleaning gave me something to do, something to control. But on my third trip between the dining table and the kitchen, I paused. Their voices were low, but I could still hear them. They weren't whispering. "She's just not cut out for more," my mom said. I froze. "I mean, he's sweet and helpful, but that's all." There was a pause. "We gave him every chance," my father added. "But he's not like Ryan. Ryan thinks bigger. He takes risks. That's how success works." My stomach clenched. I leaned against the counter to steady myself. Then came the part that changed everything. "It was a risk co-signing that last loan," my father said. "But if Ryan makes it work this time, it'll change everything." "You think Alex even knows about it?" my mom asked. "No, and he doesn't need to. He can keep paying off the house. He's good for that." I couldn't breathe. They had taken out another loan for Ryan, behind my back, after I'd already drained my own savings to save their house. And they saw me as what? A live-in safety net? A walking bank account? That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of anger. Not yet. What I felt was colder. Numb. Like someone had pulled a curtain back and showed me what was really behind it. It wasn't that they didn't love me. It was that they didn't see me. Not really. Not as a person with dreams or limits. Just as a support beam. If I collapsed, they'd only be upset that the roof came down with me. By morning, the numbness had calcified into something firmer. Something solid. Resolve. I made 3 quiet decisions over a cup of coffee. I was going to leave. I wasn't telling them. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing everything. I reviewed every account I had access to: utilities, rent, groceries, internet. I'd set most of them up myself under my name. Not because I wanted control, but because no one else ever bothered. That turned out to be the one lucky accident in this whole mess. I made a checklist, removed my credit cards from the auto payments, reassigned the grocery delivery, canceled the direct deposits to their landlord. I even took back the spare keys I'd given them for my car, quietly, without a word. They never noticed. They were too busy doting on Ryan, who'd stayed an extra week after pitching something big to investors. He made more vague phone calls, showed my dad a prospectus that looked like it had been printed off Canva. I listened from my room, watching the bank apps on my phone, waiting for the final payment on their utilities to clear. Then I made the call to the landlord. The lease had been in my name. I told him I was moving out at the end of the month. I told him I wouldn't be renewing. He asked if the rest of the household knew. I told him that wasn't my concern. "You were always the one I trusted to pay on time," he said. I almost smiled. The day before I left, I cooked dinner one last time. Nothing fancy. Pasta and Jared sauce. They barely acknowledged it. Ryan was talking about crypto again. I tuned it out. My mom reminded me to pick up more paper towels tomorrow. My dad asked if I'd pay the garbage bill early. I nodded. Then I quietly walked to my room, zipped up the last bag, and loaded it into my trunk under the cover of night. They didn't hear a thing. And the next morning, when they opened the fridge and found it empty, when the internet blinked off mid-video, when the rent bounced, and the late notices stacked on the kitchen counter, they'd have to ask one question. What happens when the invisible sun disappears? The silence came first. Not the quiet of a peaceful morning, but the unfamiliar, creeping stillness of systems shutting down. The lights still worked, at first, but the air felt different. The fridge was empty. The thermostat didn't respond. The house was no longer alive the way it had been when I had kept it running. According to the neighbor across the street, who called me, not them, my mom stood in the driveway the next morning waving her phone in the air, trying to get a signal. Apparently the internet had cut out midstream, and she thought it was a glitch. When she called the provider, they told her the bill had been canceled. Account closed. No balance remaining. And no, they said, There was no record of her name on the account. She must have tried to call me. I'd already blocked their numbers. The first real panic must have hit a few days later when the landlord knocked. Rent was overdue. No one had responded to the notice. No one had paid the late fee. That's when the real blow landed. I had not just moved out. I had terminated the lease. My name was gone. The landlord had a new tenant lined up. My father called me then. New number. I let it go to voicemail. He sounded confused, not angry yet. Hey, just wanted to ask about the rent. You still covering it? It's late. Thought maybe the bank was delayed. It wasn't. The following week, another message. Less polite. What the hell is going on, Alex? We're getting notices. You didn't say anything. Your mother's upset. Ryan says this is immature. Ryan. That was the part that twisted in my gut, not because he was still around, but because they were still deferring to him. Still listening. Still trusting. At least, for a little while longer. 2 weeks after I left, the fallout hit full force. It started with a headline. A small article, buried online, sent to me by an old classmate. Local entrepreneur arrested for fraudulent investment scheme. I didn't even have to read the name, but I did anyway. Ryan Carter. He'd been charged with wire fraud, identity theft, and falsifying loan documents. He'd been operating a shell company for nearly 2 years, funneling fake invoices through stolen EINs and selling coaching packages for financial freedom that were plagiarized from Reddit posts. One of the bank accounts used in the scam had been co-signed by my father. Another loan had been taken out using my mother's social security number. Both parents had unknowingly been complicit. According to the investigation, Ryan had never been investing. He'd been living on borrowed time, taking loan after loan, laundering small bits to cover up the rest. When the pandemic hit, he applied for small business relief funding, twice, under 2 names. The second name was mine. That was when I called the detective. I didn't want to see them jailed. I wasn't looking for revenge. Not in the traditional sense. But I wanted off every document, every contract, every risk they had tied me to. I told them when I'd left. I showed them the paperwork I had, screenshots, payment logs, text messages where Ryan admitted he used my info just to look good on paper. The officer asked if I was pressing charges. I said no. He asked why. I just said, because the world already did. When the news hit local feeds, the same neighbors who once whispered that I was lazy started whispering something else. That maybe I wasn't the disappointment. That maybe they had backed the wrong son. The next week, my parents tried again. New numbers. New messages. This time, the tone was desperate. Alex, we're losing the house. We didn't know what Ryan was doing. He said it was just paperwork. Then, a voicemail from my mom. Please come back. We didn't mean what we said. You're the only one who can fix this. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I had removed myself from every shared account. The debt I'd paid was now mine alone, refinanced, cleared, independent. The auto payments were gone. The food deliveries, the internet plan, the insurance I used to pay for, vanished. They were no longer mine to manage. Their stability had never been theirs. It was borrowed from me. And now, they were defaulting on everything they took for granted. Ryan was denied bail. The prosecution argued he was a flight risk. His lawyer tried to paint him as a misunderstood entrepreneur. The judge didn't buy it. 6 felony counts. Potential prison sentence of 12 to 15 years. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't have to. I did, however, walk past my childhood home a week after the court date. I didn't stop. I didn't knock. But I saw enough. The mailbox was stuffed with letters. Legal-sized envelopes. Red stamps. The porch light was out. The front blinds were closed, though I caught a glimpse of movement behind one, someone pacing. Maybe my father. Maybe my mother. They were still there, for now. But it was all unraveling. All of it. And they were on their own. They called me again 3 weeks after the arrest. It was my mother this time. Her voice sounded hoarse, brittle. Not like someone who had cried, but like someone who had run out of things to say. Alex, please, she began, then paused. We didn't know. About Ryan. We thought. He said it was legal. That it was just complicated paperwork. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask where I was living. She just begged me to come by the house. Just talk to us. We're drowning. For a moment, I stared at the screen. The number wasn't saved anymore. But I recognized the sound of defeat. That house, once full of noise, must have gone completely still. I agreed to come by the next day. Not because I wanted to help, but because I wanted them to finally see what they had created and lost. I pulled into the driveway around 11 a.m. The grass hadn't been cut in weeks. The mailbox was zip-tied shut. A county code violation notice flapped against the front window. The curtains were still drawn. When I knocked, it took them a full minute to answer. My father opened the door. His hair was thinner. His gut had shrunk. He didn't look angry, or proud, or even ashamed. He just looked empty, like someone who hadn't slept properly in months. He stepped aside, and I walked into the house that used to be mine. It was colder than I remembered, physically and emotionally. The warmth was gone. The life was gone. All that remained was the shell. My mother stood in the kitchen. She looked smaller too, frilier, like the structure of the house had collapsed inward and crushed her with it. They didn't offer coffee. There was none. I sat at the table. My dad cleared his throat first. "We need help," he said. "We're 2 months behind on the mortgage. Utilities are threatening to shut off. Your mother's medical coverage lapsed. The only thing keeping this place standing is, well, nothing." I let the words sit. Then my mother said what she thought would work. "You were always the reliable one, the one we could count on." It wasn't an apology. It was a tactic. I looked at them both. These people I'd once broken myself to protect. I remembered every dinner I'd bought, every overdue bill I'd paid off, every night I'd worked late to cover a shortfall they never even noticed. I reached into my folder and pulled out 3 documents. The first was a bank statement showing the refinanced debt. The mortgage I'd once saved with my money had been pulled from their names. I'd paid it. I owned nothing, and neither did they. The second was a printed statement from the landlord. My name had been removed from the lease 3 months prior. The home was no longer under my guarantee. A new tenant had already been approved. They would need to leave by the end of the month. The third was an auto-pay cancellation record. Internet, groceries, phone lines, all previously paid from my account. All disabled. Nothing was left in my name. I slid them across the table. My mother's hands shook as she picked them up. My father didn't even touch his copy. "You can't just abandon us," he muttered. "I didn't," I said quietly. "I left. There's a difference." My mom's lip quivered. "But you always said you'd take care of us." "No," I replied. "I did take care of you. I paid for everything. I gave you stability. And you used it to prop up a fantasy of Ryan. You funded his lies. You ignored every red flag. And when I asked for respect, you called me small-minded." They didn't deny it. They couldn't. "Ryan's in prison," my father said. Like I didn't know. Like it might excuse something. 12 years. They're calling it white collar, but he'll serve time. I nodded. "He called me," I added. Tried to say it was a misunderstanding. Said the judge was being harsh. My mom jumped in. "You answered him?" "No," I said, but I let it ring. So he'd know I saw his name. The silence returned. This time, it wasn't hostile. It was mournful. Heavy. My father leaned back in his chair, staring at nothing. My mother looked down at the table, her eyes welling with something that looked like realization, but came far too late. I stood up. Neither of them tried to stop me. At the door, my mother asked, almost a whisper, "So what do we do now?" I turned back. "You start over." Like I had to, with less than I had. And I walked out. I never went back. 2 months later, the house was listed as vacated. I heard they moved in with an aunt out of state. She wasn't close. She wasn't generous. But she had room. That was all they had left, space, not affection. Ryan tried to contact me again from prison. A typed letter, full of half apologies and justifications. I didn't read past the first paragraph. I'm not angry anymore. Not even hurt. What I feel now is distance. A clean, honest distance between me and the people who raised me to feel small, until I carried them, and they collapsed anyway. They thought Ryan was their ticket out. They thought I was a backup plan. What they never saw was that I was the structure holding everything up. And when I walked away, they finally saw what happened. When the foundation disappears. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.